Stockholm is a series of comedy/grimdark romance fanfics of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, written by Nintendo Gal 55 and Lily P. Plot synopsis. When out on a retreat in a family cabin, Fluttershy discovers that Rainbow Dash is an intersex and had been carrying a torch for her for quite a while. Feeling like things are going stale in her relationship with Big Macintosh, Fluttershy opts to have an affair with her. However, Rainbow's own personal issues start to get in the way of what she thought was supposed to be a sexual bliss. While having to deal with Rainbow's sexual kink for teenagers, she also finds herself being the rock for Twilight's abusive marriage. A date with Rosy Palms. Rainbow has a few moments of this, especially given that she has the part for it. What? Oh, she's intersex, so she has a cock. I get it. All abusers are male. In a rare subversion, Twilight reveals to have once had a history of abusing Essentia, and in fact has continued this trend under the assumption that Essentia enjoyed it. Great. Great. Babies ever after. The epilogue features both Twilight and Fluttershy sometime after having given birth to their children. Twilight has a girl whom she names Sunrise. Fluttershy has a boy, naming him Spectrum. You're on the fucking spectrum if you wrote this. Essentia is present for the former, but it's Scootaloo who's around for the latter. Despite her absence, Fluttershy recounts that Rainbow was excited for their baby to be born. What the fuck happened to Rainbow Dash? I know you're asking, well let's find out. Bittersweet ending. Despite both couples largely coming to a happy end, Rainbow is still committed to a mental hospital, and Essentia is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and hinted that she may never recover. Fantastic. Both couples come to a happy end, except for the other people in the couple. They're fucked. Bookends. Somewhat. Anyway, the story begins and ends with Rainbow and Fluttershy having sex. What else would it start with? Am I right, fellas? That's the only way to start and end a story, as far as I'm concerned. But I would really enjoy it. This element comes up at moments when Rainbow is coming to terms with her fetish for teenage girls, yup. Before and then after she nearly gives in to Sweetie Belle's Philly Fatale advance. Sweetie Belle herself justifies this as she gives in to her urges. However, she comes to find she will indeed regret it if it did end up happening. Even Fluttershy had a brief moment of this early on, but is actually the only one who ever truly gave in to her temptations. What were her temptations? I'm sure you're asking. That's a great question. I'm not going to answer it. Clingy jealous girl. Fluttershy becomes a very mild example of this. In spite of the irony, she eventually comes to terms that she doesn't want to share Rainbow Dash with others. It later becomes averted as she joins Rainbow in a threesome on 2 occasions. Covert Pervert. Rainbow Dash is secretly nursing a fetish for young girls. While Nintendo Gal has experience with it, Lily has long been uncomfortable writing smut. Want to point out, Lily's first fan fiction was about a trainer fucking a Gardevoir. So there you go. Not that uncomfortable. Demonization. Rainbow Dash is a closet pedophile. Well, who does that sound like? Fluttershy is an adulterer. Yep. Twilight Sparkle is an abuser and a rapist. Yeah, that too. Essentia Cortai has severe Stockholm syndrome. He's got something. Not Stockholm syndrome, but something. Pretty much every character is portrayed to be on some level quite flawed or somehow mentally unstable. Those aren't flaws. That's not the word for that. Essentia is being physically and sexually abused by Twilight and yet refuses to leave her. In fact, she reacts to the very idea of their marriage ending with outright hostility. It's slightly averted with Rainbow and Fluttershy as they are not abusive with each other, but more with themselves. Oh. Domestic abuse. Twilight both physically and sexually abuses Essentia. Earn your happy ending. The ending itself, while still leaving a lot in the air, does have the characters in much better places with themselves and each other. Except for the part where one of them's committed and the other one's fucked in the head. I guess they're both fucked in the head if one of them's committed. Just one needs more constant treatment. Foreshadowing. When Twilight breaks up with Essentia during high school, Essentia hits rock bottom. Locking herself in her bedroom, neglecting to shower, gorging on junk food, and drinking herself into a stupor. This is a fucking horse. Fast forward to their marriage, and Essentia willfully suffers through Twilight's abuse out of fear of their relationship ending again. Great! Great! Happily married. Taking out all the domestic abuse and Stockholm Syndrome, Twilight and Essentia are still happily married. If you just ignore the parts where they hate and beat each other, they're fine together. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Lampshade hanging. Essentia does this for Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash very early on. Two best friends spending a lovely winter weekend at a cabin in the woods. One of them is gay. Tell me that's not the plot to one of Twilight's crappy romance novels? Question mark. May-December romance, somewhat subverted when Pinkie Pie eventually reveals that she got sexually involved with Discord, who was older than her since she was 17. He is more or less a sugar daddy to her. I don't know where the subversion is on that. I guess it's because he's only a sugar daddy. So it's not really a romance as much as it is a May-December prostitution. But I don't really think, like, whores have that much say in who they're with. I guess if you're a classy one, you can kind of turn dudes away. I guess. By God, what have I done? Twilight realizing the extent of the damage her abuse on Essentia had been. Rainbow Dash nearly giving in to Sweetie Belle and seeing that it ruined her relationship. Fluttershy getting caught by the Apple family of her adultery, especially in how it hurt Apple Bloom. What the I think Apple Bloom's a child. Only sane woman. Twilight, the physical and emotional abuser. She is the only person who seems to think that Rainbow's volatile anger, sexual desire towards minors, and out-of-control emotions might require some kind of professional help, and has her hospitalized. She tries very hard to solve her abuse issues with psychological help, despite her wife fighting against her at every turn about it. She's the only character who seems genuinely remorseful at the horrible things she's done throughout the story. Well, isn't that fine? Isn't it good that she's remorseful about the part where she's beating her lover? I know it says here that she's trying to get past it, but the way it's worded makes it sound like she's still doing it, which isn't cool, alright? You can't, like, have a knife in someone's stomach and be like, man, I really gotta fucking work on my anger issues. When Rainbow isn't engaged in pretty much anything else, she is horny and usually sports a boner. Rape is a special kind of evil. Everything from hardcore sex to beatings to Rainbow Dash's fantasies about the Cutie Mark Crusaders are laid out in full for the readers to see. No, that's not how you do that. That's not what that means. That means that, like, when someone commits a rape, they get a worse punishment, or that rape is presented in a way that it's considerably worse than any other action. Just because you show the rape in explicit detail doesn't mean that you're pointing out that that rape is worse. That just means you're writing out the rape explicitly. That's not what that means. Shut up. Quite a few of these are given. One notable example is the Crusaders plus the main characters getting one to Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. The end result has the two bullies apologizing for their actions and making amends. Now, when you say the word bully, I think about, like, a fat kid on a bus calling a scrawny kid a faggot. And that's shitty when you're a kid, because you think, like, oh, is that dude gonna hit me? And you can't really get away because you're stuck on the bus with him. In this context, where the main characters are abusing and raping their girlfriends, bully being the person who gets this big old speech, that doesn't quite fit. Romanticized abuse. Twilight's repeated beating and raping of Essentia is initially played as this before the mood whiplash kicks in. Shouldn't Twilight be in prison if she's genuinely remorseful? Shouldn't she straight up be in prison for doing this? She should not just decide to stop doing it, and she should not just be in treatment. She should be in prison because she's dangerous. Second act breakup. Big Macintosh ends things with Fluttershy when the apples catch her and Rainbow Dash in the middle of sexual play. Good on you, Big Macintosh. You kicked that fucking thought to the side. Shown their work. Essentia's desperation and near denial of Twilight's abuse, coupled with her volatile mood swings, are painfully accurate of victims of more brutal domestic abuse. The thing about it is usually when you're doing a depiction of a brutal domestic abuser, the abuser is not sympathetic. There's like one example of an abuser being halfway sympathetic, and they don't make the abuser like out to be the good guy in the end. Like, The Shining's the only example of the abuser being halfway sympathetic, and he's still fucking dead by the end because he's an abuser. Sickeningly Sweetheart. In spite of its origin, Twilight affectionately calls Essentia by the nickname of Kitten. They display a lot of tender moments together. Like rape. Stockholm Syndrome. In the second act of the story, Essentia very clearly shows symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome. So much so that even one of these stories' authors admitted to being scared of her. Of her. You fucking Christian retard. Of her. Of your own creation. Fluttershy also shows symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome toward Rainbow Dash, which serves as a take that to obsessive shipping fanfiction. That's what that is. That's what that is. That's not just like a weird trend by someone who's never touched a woman or been emotionally intimate with anyone in their life. Nah, it's a clever little thing. Take that, audience. Rainbow Dash's pedophilia and Twilight's abuse of Essentia are played rather lightheartedly, even having entire smut scenes dedicated to them, before the story turns around and portrays both these issues very seriously, and the situation gets highly disturbing very fast. Especially if a reader had been previously enjoying the sex scenes devoted to them, and now has to watch Essentia break down in tears, wondering why Twilight keeps hitting her. I'm going to stop this right now. Some works are able to do this effectively. I think Evangelion is a really good one. In Evangelion, there's a teacher character who is sort of played up as like the sexy teacher. And like, there's some of that in there, but the main character's not into it. And it's not super gratuitous. It's like she's kind of wearing kind of revealing clothes, and she drinks a lot, shit like that. And then later in the story, we find out that she's only ever been intimate with one guy, and that because her father died when she was so young, she doesn't know how to be emotionally intimate with a man. She can only be intimate with a man physically. So when she's put in this mother role to this kid, she doesn't know how to act except as kind of a sorority slut, and it fucks with his head. Now, if you were getting off to her up until that point, you know, yeah, the show had those elements in it, but the show wasn't really giving you a huge amount. There's some in the first episode, and then they kind of drop it. It's a part of her character, but there's not long lingering shots on it. They don't dedicate detailed sex sequences to the characters in their abusive styling. That doesn't happen. Because that's a little fucked. And at some point, you have to wonder, maybe the person who wrote this, maybe they just wanted to write a sex scene with a little kid. Or write a sex scene with an abusive character. And then they realized, wow, I'm kind of a monster. And instead of deciding, maybe I should go see a doctor or something about this, they decided, nah, I'll just make it so that in the later half we talk about how fucked up it is. That fixes it. It doesn't fix it. Alright? Law & Order SVU is a TV show about rape. That's the basic concept of the show, is cops stopping rape. And in fucking 20 seasons, They've never once had to show it in explicit detail. They've never even been able to say, like, the real fucked up shit that happens in any detail. Yet every episode, if nothing else, drives home how fucked up rape is. It turns out you can make these points without explicitly showing anything. That's crazy, right? That's it. There's really nothing else here. That was kind of it. I really don't have anywhere else to go with this. You're fucked, Pete. You piece of fuck shit. Donate to my Patreon, Bombastic Light Productions.